Hey guys, my name is Pixie from AppyBuilder, and I've created this video as an introduction to my new series, Beginner Programming Concepts. One of the great things about AppyBuilder is that you don't need any programming experience to create an app. However, I would still recommend at least learning some of the basic programming concepts to make your life a little easier. Think about these people who can create incredible cakes and candies that look like pieces of art. I'm sure you've seen memes or the Nailed It show on Netflix of non-bakers trying to recreate these works of art. But when they try to recreate this really cool dessert, they end up with something like this. The reason why is usually because they're trying to go from grasshopper to Zen master in an afternoon. In order to make something like this, you need to know how to bake a simple cake. When you know the basics, you can create any type of cake that you want. Learning the basics for any skill is extremely important. AppyBuilder doesn't require you to learn how to code, but you should at least learn the built-in blocks and the any components. You have to understand that you're not going to watch this video series and be able to master programming in 5 hours. As with any skill, it's going to take a lot of practice, but the more apps that you create, the more these concepts will make sense, and eventually you'll just know what to do. The purpose of this tutorial series is to introduce you to these programming concepts. For those of you who are really serious about possibly becoming an app developer or programmer, I've created some notes from these videos on my website. I'm going to be updating this section all the time, so if, 5 months from now I realize, oh, I wish I would have mentioned that in the video, I will go ahead and update that information here. Over time, this section will have more examples and files that you can use to help you out. When you watch this video series, I will say the same thing over and over at the beginning and the end of the video, just in case someone randomly found this series and started on part 5 instead of part 1. If you've been watching these videos in order, like you should be, feel free to skip the first minute and a half of each video. However, it is extremely important that you understand the first minute and a half. The reason being is because I get comments all the time like, this video is too hard for beginners, and the video description states, this is an intermediate level video, it will be very hard for beginners, and the first 15 seconds of the video says, this is easy, medium, or hard for an intermediate level tutorial. So I'm making it a very strong point to let you know the difficulty of each video. For example, if something is easy for an intermediate level student, that means it is actually hard for a beginner level student. If something is easy for a beginner level student, it will be easy for everybody watching it. There are 2 difficulty settings for this video series. These videos are aimed at novice to beginner level programmers, meaning I assume you have 0 coding experience or very little. And you are at least a beginner to intermediate level AppyBuilder user. We're not going to go over AppyBuilder basics. I'm just going to assume that you can look at this block, and even if you don't know what it does, you can at least kind of recognize where it came from because you know blocks are color-coded and you can read. I'm going to say things like, this is what the result looks like in live test, and assume that you know what that means. If you didn't understand a word of what I just said, then you probably want to watch some beginner videos on using AppyBuilder before you watch this video series. Lastly, please understand that the title of this series is Beginner Programming Concepts. There is nothing to follow along with. There might be 1 or 2 AIA files for some of the more complicated concepts, but the first 3 videos are basically just explanations and pretend examples. Part 2 and Part 3 in this series are more of a reference guide than any of the other concepts. The most important videos in this series are variables, conditions, lists, loops, procedures, and the any components. That being said, go ahead and start Part 1 in this series.